Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of Memories of Margaret, where the life and legacy of Margaret Curle will be shared through stories of her love for Christ, her family, her love of learning, and her love of all people. I am your host, Martha Sue French, and I'm also the youngest daughter of Howard and Margaret Curle. Now, this episode is entitled Introducing Margaret. The goal is to keep the broadcast around the 15-minute mark, but we may run a little longer in future episodes when we have guests. Okay, full disclosure, this is a new forum and format for me. So as we go through the season, I will learn how maybe to add things, how to get better, how not to look so nervous, but just full disclosure, that's out there. So today I'm going to be providing a background on Margaret, who she was, and why her life was important to so many people. Now, she's going to be referred to many names. So you'll hear Margaret, you'll hear her be referred to as Mama or Nan, but they are all referring to Margaret Curle. Now, this year marks the 100th anniversary of her birth. It's important to note that you can't really say Margaret without saying Howard, who again was my father. So it's hard to say Mama without saying Daddy, or to say Nan without saying Pap. So while the title is Memories of Margaret, just know that there will be many memories and stories shared of Daddy as well as other family members. So today I'm going to be sharing pictures with the video audience. So if you're listening only to the audio version, feel free to jump over to YouTube, as I'll be referencing some of the photos as I speak. Okay, here, Margaret, she was born in Upton, Kentucky in 1924. I think this photo here, she was about 2 years old. She was raised as an only child by her aunt and uncle, Ephraim and Mary McDougall, and we called them Mama Eve and Papa Eve. So here's a picture. Here is, say, it's kind of grainy, but here is the man that I remember vaguely. This was Papa Eve. This lady here on the end was Mama Eve. Here, if you can see the arrows, this is actually Mama's mother, Mabel Bugs, which is my grandmother. Not quite sure who the other two ladies are. So if there's anyone in my family who knows that, maybe we can share that in a later episode, but I'm not quite sure who they are. You'll notice in this picture that she has a book in her hand. So from an early age, she loved books, she loved writing, and she loved learning. She instilled that in all her children. She became a member of Walnut Hill Baptist Church, where she remained until her death in 2001. This picture here, here's Mama in the back. I'm not sure if she was the head of a Sunday school class or what, but this is the outside of Walnut Hill Baptist Church. This is in Upton, Kentucky. That is still standing today. Now, if you notice here in the background, this is an outhouse. It's not here today, but I remember this outhouse being here when I would go to Walnut Hill. I grew up in this church as well. So again, this shows Mama as a young teen, it looks like, at Walnut Hill. Now, she attended Bond Washington High School in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and she was the valedictorian of her graduating class. Here are just a few. It was probably just a few in her class, but here is a picture, I believe, of her graduating class. I'm not sure if this is everyone. I thought there were more people in her graduating class, but here on the end, you can see how studious she looks. Margaret Whitman, that was her maiden name. Margaret Whitman was the valedictorian of Bond Washington High School in 1942. it's just hard to believe when you look at your parents at that age that they had a life before, before marriage, before you. So in 1950, at the age of 26, which was old at that time, she married Howard Curle, who was 30 years old. And they went on to have 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. Again, I happen to be the youngest. And this picture, I think it was from circa 1986, maybe. But here's Daddy. There's Margaret, Mama. We'll go from the oldest to the youngest. There's Ann. And then Jimmy. Billy, or Reverend Curle. Kenny. Wyoma. Oma, or Y. And then me, Sue. I remember I just hated this picture because I always felt like I was in my oldest sister's shadow. Yes, Ann, you. And see how she has the nice structured suit on and straight teeth. This was before I had braces. And I have on the Chess King limp bow. That was back when suits and bows were in. So I had that going for me, but I was always looking out from the back of her shadow. That's how I felt anyway. So anyway, they had 6 children. Here we are in the 80s, and you can tell some of those hairdos were from the 80s. If you notice from Jimmy, God rest him, I miss my big brother. He passed away in 2020. But look at that Jerry curl. And it was the long curl at that. And look how big the glasses were. Yeah. Didn't know the glasses frames were that big, but anyway. Here is the last picture I think we all took together as a family, because they celebrated 50 years of marriage in June of 2000. This was, as you noticed, Daddy was at the hospital. He couldn't even come to the celebration that we had planned for them at the church in Hodgenville. But later that year, Daddy passed away in September of 2000. And then less than a year later, Mama would pass away in August of 2001. But I believe growing up an only child had an impact on the love that she had for books. And she loved to read, but she also loved to write poetry. She wrote poems for just about every occasion, and you're going to see that in subsequent episodes. So one of the things I want to share with you that it's really, really interesting, and this is going to come into play later on too. So her diary was found years after her death at a yard sale in Upton, Kentucky. And I'm not sure who had it, but somehow somebody notified my sister, Wyoma, and she made copies for all of us. And this is the copy that she made. It was one of the 5-year diaries. So this is all in my mother's handwriting. 5-year diary. And it says, it was a gift from Sister Bessie Buggs in Christmas of 1938, which means my mother would have been 14 years old at the time. So I'm not sure who Bessie Buggs was, but Mama did not start journaling in this diary until 1942. So she would have been 18. So these entries are from 1942, 43, 44, 45, and 46. And I was trying to go through and read it chronologically. But again, think about it, 1942 to 1946, this was, 8 years. She started it 8 years before she got married. So when I was reading some of the entries, there were other people mentioned. She wrote a lot. So she wrote to a lot of the soldiers. And there were some people mentioned here that weren't Daddy. So I'll get into that in a later episode. But I was just like, who are these men? Also, in this book, Mama also was a correspondent for the hometown local newspaper, the LaRue County Herald News. And she had her, I guess it was her section, it was called Margaret's Musings. And she would write articles for the paper. She would be a guest at the high school. They would come and have her talk to their English classes. She just had a world of knowledge, of wealth. She was so smart. Let me just show you the two books. There were more books, but there are two books I'll be actually taking from. One is She Still Speaks. This was posthumously published after her death. And From My Heart to Yours. This was posthumously published. However, an original of this, she did have it published prior to her death, and I believe it was in 1986. She would enter all type of contests from World of Poetry. She was actually recognized from World of Poetry for some of her poems. But, and excuse me, that's one of the things I'll learn is to turn my phone on silent so it won't make any noise, because I'm sure you hear that. But today, that's it. That's the brief introduction of Margaret. So thank you for tuning in. Please watch Memories of Margaret on YouTube or listen on Spotify. Also, please like us on Facebook. We'd appreciate your feedback. And if you would like to be a guest on a future episode, just please leave a message on the Facebook page. That's Memories of Margaret. Or you can send an email to Memories of Margaret Naomi. I know that's kind of long, but it's Memories of Margaret, MargaretNaomi @gmail.com. Again, that's Memories of Margaret Naomi @gmail.com. Now, in the next episode, I'll be sharing one of her poems and more memories. The goal is to have at least 2 episodes a month. We are working on some other podcasts that we'll be bringing to you as well. So we're going to try to make this every other week. So again, thank you for tuning in to Memories of Margaret. And until next time, make memories with your family. Thank you.